Welcome to an episode of InRange. This is one of our historical episodes, and I'm coming to you from near Belmont, Virginia, right next to a 6-lane highway, at a place that's been long forgotten. In fact, that was its intent from the very beginning. Between 1796 and 1802, or just around there, two different members of the Lee family, who were cousins of the famous Civil War general Robert E. Lee, had plantations in this area. Those plantations are now tract home developments, luxury golf courses, and strip malls. But a piece of undesirable land between the two plantations was decided upon between both of them to be dedicated as a mass burial ground for the enslaved that died working on their plantations. A local minister was starting to set up a church nearby and found out that this property was right here on their land, and they did research into it and didn't want to build on it. And an effort was then formed to preserve this as a monument to all of these lost souls and people that were essentially murdered in the effort of economic prosperity. It wasn't until 2017 that the land was actually set aside, and we now have this cemetery here filled with an unknown amount of graves, some of which has been destroyed by a person who was trying to dig a ditch for drainage, but at least some of it has been preserved. So this is forlorn. This is off the side of the freeway. There's a little desperate road that really no one goes down. And even now, this is still mostly a forgotten spot. So I'm going to turn the camera around and walk with me to go visit these people. And here we are. Restoration efforts are afoot, at least identification of different graves, and you can see each and every one of these is at least one clearly identified grave of someone whose name we will probably never know. And a piece of quote-unquote undesirable land stitched between two plantations. Ancestors of Robert E. Lee, who you know later fought for a cause that some people try to argue today was not about slavery. Grave after grave after grave after grave. Look at all those flags. Some of these rocks were placed here later to try to indicate some of the grave sites. Right next to essentially a piece of swamp. And you can see, even here, flags right there. That's an identified gravesite submerged in that swamp water. This is some of the dugout that I believe was done in an attempt to drain. So throughout this graveyard, you will find seashells on essentially every identified grave. And this is a tradition that was brought by the enslaved people from Africa as a burial tradition, one to ward off evil, as a spiritual connection, but also in this application as a tool to pay respects to those that died under enslavement, but also as a remembrance of the diaspora that was created by the transatlantic slave trade. The scope of this is a little overwhelming. You can see right here there's subsidence. This is common with an unmaintained grave. The ground is lower than the rest of the ground because the grave has collapsed underneath the earth. So the Belmont Country Club has a promotional video in which they
talk about how you should have your events there, your ceremonies, your weddings that only start at $5,000, or enjoy some fine dining, or even write your own history, as they say here. But nowhere on the website do I see a mention of the enslaved or this gravesite 1,300 yards from where these people are dining, celebrating, and playing golf.
So I get asked, or even complained to sometimes about my historical vignettes. Why is this on a firearms channel? Why is this on this channel? Well, first of all, InRange is lots of things. It's not just a firearms channel. It's a history channel. It's a culture channel. It's a digital rights channel. It's a human rights channel. It's a community building project. But this belongs very much on a firearms related channel because the topic of firearms and the intersectionality with human history and American history is a complicated one. One in which firearms allowed people to be enslaved, but also one in which firearms is what broke them free and may keep them free. It's not the tool, it's how the tool's used. And we live in a world where those items exist, whether you like that or not, and they're not going away. But also, when people say that, they say things like, this makes me sad, including people that used to be on this channel were like, these topics make me sad. I don't want to deal with these topics. And it's very much that exact problem that does not allow us to ever move forward to true and honestly facing the history of our society and country. Because when this isn't addressed, there will never be an honest conversation to be had. We can't ignore these things. It's not that you yourself are necessarily culpable for this, but to ignore it is to be part of the culpability of our historical past. To face it honestly and directly is the only way forward, which is through. So here we are, an unknown amount of enslaved people buried, once again I said for capital gains, for profit, by two different families with the name Lee, on some undesirable ground with some swamp between it and the freeway.
So while people sit in the country club having their fine dining, their golfing, their weddings, and more, we see that this tiny plot of land is still contested. In 2024, a legal battle erupted over right-of-way for power lines. I don't know what the situation is with that particular situation, but it's very clear that this is a endangered site as well as many other sites like it. If you would like to do something to help in this regard, you can access the people at the Loudoun Freedom Center, lfcva.org. You see that here on the website. They are the people that ultimately created this memorial and are struggling right now to keep it and not lost to history or worse. Thank you for watching.